Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here we are again. I told you in the last chapter that we're going to see more forms of protest, right? In chapter 4, we were introduced to Rosa Parks and Dr. Martin Luther King, who, of course, come into prominence during the Montgomery bus boycott, right? The first major action or in the name of civil rights in the United States of America. In the 5th chapter, you would have seen the Greensboro Four, right? We continue on with this theme of non-violent civil disobedience. And in this case, on the 1st of February 1960, 4 young college students walk into a Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, and that lunch counter is for white people only, and they just sit there, right? They just sit there, and they sit there from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until it closes in the evening, and then the next day, they come back and do it again, and they just sat there all day, and then it closed, and the next day, they did it again, and this went on and on and on. And the big thing about these lunch counter sit-ins is that the one in Greensboro, North Carolina, inspired lunch counter sit-ins and similar protests across the southern United States. And probably the most notable was in Nashville, Tennessee. In Nashville, Tennessee, we see sit-ins very similar to what we see in Greensboro, North Carolina, and eventually after sit-ins kind of spark across the United States of America, we even see in northern states at Woolworths, right, other Woolworth locations, that there are protesters standing outside, black and white protesters protesting against Woolworths as a company to desegregate their lunch counters. So it was a pretty amazing thing to see. And unfortunately, sometimes these protesters were attacked. But to be honest, I mean, those attacks, and John Lewis mentioned this in the documentary. If you don't know who John Lewis is, you should Google his name. You should go to YouTube and just type John Lewis Civil Rights Movement and see what you get. The man is just an incredible human being. I believe at this point, John Lewis, I mean, he's a much, much older man now. He serves in the American federal government. I believe he is a congressman from, I think, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. And he is currently battling cancer. But guys, John Lewis was incredibly important during the civil rights movement. And at one of the lunch counter sit-ins, he was dragged off the lunch counter, thrown onto the ground and kicked. And it wasn't the white people who were using violence against the black protesters who were arrested. It was the black protesters who got beat up, who were doing nothing because they're just sitting there non-violently. It was those people who got arrested. And John Lewis was one of those individuals. And he said that he had never felt as alive as when he was being arrested. And he said that the paddy wagon that him and the protesters were being put in felt like, a chariot to, the gates of St. Peter's or something like that. Like, it's a very interesting idea. And eventually we see the lunch counters in the South become desegregated because of the pressure that these sit-ins put on these companies. And beyond just the pressure of the sit-ins, as more and more black people engaged in the protest against these different companies who wouldn't allow black people to eat there, they would choose to not spend their money there as well. So the sit-ins inspired further economic boycott, which hurt the company's bottom line, which was a very effective way in creating change. I mean, guys, you have to understand, companies are motivated by one thing and one thing only, and that is making profit. And if the economic interests of a company are hurt by the actions of potential consumers, then that company is going to be forced to have to change what they do. And that's what these lunch counter sit-in protests accomplished, right? They hurt the bottom line of these companies and caused these companies to reevaluate their position on civil rights, which was really cool to see. All right. Next chapter, chapter 6, it's going to hit the fan, right? It is going to hit the fan in Birmingham, Alabama. So we'll check you next chapter. Peace. Love you guys as always. Hope you're staying good, and we'll talk to you later.